They say heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear worn-out hoodies, carry bruises on their hearts, and live in places no one notices until someone tries to take them away. In a quiet corner of Arizona, behind a weathered garage door, hope was being built brick by fragile brick. Not everyone understood its purpose. Not everyone wanted it to stand. But when power disguises itself in community, rules and threats come dressed as protocol. The real fight begins. This isn't just a story about a building. It's about the people it sheltered, the lines someone dared to draw when no one else would, and the war they never asked for, but refused to lose. It started on a Monday, the kind of gray, dry cold that makes you feel like the sky's holding its breath. Evan Marshall stood barefoot in his kitchen, pouring his first cup of coffee. The creak of floorboards beneath him, the low hum of the fridge. Those quiet morning sounds had become his daily sanctuary. After 2 decades as a systems engineer, and the last 6 years as a widower, Evan had learned to appreciate silence. Too much noise reminded him of what he'd lost. He lived in Mountain View, Colorado, a small, peaceful neighborhood with postcard views and just enough distance between homes to feel personal. That morning, though, something was off. He heard the sound before he saw it. Low mechanical grating. Not a truck, not a snowplow. It was heavier. He walked to the window and felt his stomach tighten. A bulldozer, sitting in his driveway like it belonged there, the kind with steel teeth and arrogance. 2 men in navy blue jackets stood beside it. The letters HOA were emblazoned across their backs. Not city workers, not contractors, HOA agents. Evan stepped outside, boots, half-lace jacket unzipped. Cold bit into his neck. But the adrenaline was hotter. "You lost?" he asked, not masking the irritation in his voice. The taller man turned, flipping a laminated ID badge like it meant something. "You Evan Marshall?" "I am." "You want to explain why there's a bulldozer on my property?" The man smiled thinly. "I'm Troy Grayson. This is official business from the Mountain View HOA Compliance Division. We're here to remove an unapproved structure." Evan blinked. "What structure?" "The garage," Troy said, motioning casually, like he was pointing at a rusted bike. "Violation 17B. Illegal. Modification of residential footprint." Evan laughed once. "Dry. That garage was built in 1989. It's permitted, inspected, and registered." Grayson shrugged. "Not with the new overlay ordinance. Your permit's outdated." Evan's voice dropped. "That garage is protected under the Safe Harbor, Federal Shelter Act. You touch it, and you're breaking federal law." The shorter man, stockier arms crossed over his chest, chuckled. "His name tag," said Frank. He leaned forward slightly. "You got paperwork for that, pal? It's filed. DOJ authorized. This house is a registered safe house." "Then produce it," Troy snapped. Evan's jaw tightened. Inside locked. "And unless you've got a federal override, you're not even supposed to be on this property." Frank took off his sunglasses and leaned in. "Then maybe call your lawyer. We'll be here a while." Evan glanced over his shoulder toward the garage. A part of him wanted to run inside, grab the documents, shove them in their smug faces. But the other part, the part trained by years of logic and consequence, held still. Inside that garage, beneath it actually, were 3 women and 1 child. The child's name was Rosie, 14 years old. She didn't speak much. Evan hadn't pried. He didn't need to. Her arrival came late one night, escorted by a volunteer from a Denver shelter, and one look in her eyes told Evan enough trauma lived there, fresh and raw. Now 2 men with badges that meant nothing were threatening the one place that girl felt safe. "You don't have jurisdiction," Evan said calmly, but with fire under every syllable. "You take 1 step toward that building, and I'll file federal obstruction so fast," Troy cut him off. "You can file whatever you want, but we're acting under emergency clause 38A. This structure poses a community aesthetic hazard." Evan blinked. "You're calling it ugly," Frank grinned. "Well, it's not exactly a showcase." That's when Evan knew something was wrong. This wasn't about aesthetics. This wasn't even about code. It was targeted. He looked at the bulldozer again, the way the operator inside hadn't even stepped out. Just sat there, engine idling like he was waiting for the signal. These men weren't inspectors. They were enforcers. Evan's fists clenched. His voice came low. I'm telling you now, if you damage that garage, you're endangering federal protections and lives. Troy's face remained unreadable. Then I suggest you find that paperwork. You've got 1 hour. And with that, the two men turned, walked toward the bulldozer, and started coordinating. Evan stood in the snow. Coffee, forgotten hands, shaking, not from the cold, not from fear, from something older, from the rising anger that had been buried ever since he'd buried his wife. He turned back toward the house. The sky was still holding its breath, so was he, because this was only the beginning. By noon, the bulldozer was still in the driveway, and the tension had spread like frostbite across the entire neighborhood. Evan didn't waste time. The moment he got inside, he dialed the Safe Harbor Federal Emergency Line. He spoke with a woman named Carla, who confirmed the garage's protected status and said she'd notify a regional field agent immediately. But bureaucracy ran slow, and danger was already parked outside. The power was still mysteriously out. Wires cut cleanly behind the breaker box. Deliberate, calculated. Evan had to switch to backup batteries to keep the security cameras running. Downstairs, the families staying in the hidden basement space beneath the garage were silent. Rosie sat curled up on a sleeping bag, her back to the wall, arms around her knees. The other two women, both recent arrivals from a domestic violence shelter in Colorado Springs, sat with quiet tension like prey that had learned never to relax. We'll be okay. Evan told them, I'll keep you safe. They didn't respond. It wasn't the first time they'd heard that line. Outside, Troy and Frank were now joined by a third man, clean-cut clipboard. Bluetooth headset, his vest said, zoning consultant, which was HOA speak for plausible deniability. Evan watched them through the slats of his blinds. They were laughing. That's what pissed him off most. This wasn't just a mission to tear down a garage. It was theater. They were making a show of power, flexing muscle, in a community that was supposed to be safe. And Evan knew how that show worked. You don't bulldoze a building to enforce code. You bulldoze it to send a message. So he sent one of his own at 2:17 p.m. Evan uploaded the bulldozer footage to every HOA watchdog group he could find, tagged it with federal safe house attack, and CC'd 3 local news stations. It took 27 minutes to go viral. By 3 p.m., Channel 7 was outside his gate. By 3:30, the HOA team was scrambling. Troy was on his phone, pacing. Frank looked more nervous now, his sunglasses off, hands twitching. The bulldozer engine went silent for the first time all day. That should have felt like a win, but it didn't, because right before the 5 o'clock news segment aired, Evan received a letter. Not an email, not a call. A hand-delivered letter, plain white envelope, slipped into his mailbox without a sound. He opened it. Dear Mr. Marshall, this is not about your garage. You are harboring individuals flagged by the Mountain View Security Oversight Committee. Their presence is a liability to the community. Your failure to comply with the HOA's remediation orders constitutes willful defiance and may result in escalated enforcement actions. Stand down, or we will escalate. HOA Internal Compliance Enforcement Division 9. There was no name, no phone number, just a red stamp that read, confidential. Evan read the letter 3 times. Then he went to the garage and started bolting metal sheets to the interior walls. He knew exactly what was coming. This wasn't about a building. This was about control, and it wasn't just his fight anymore. By nightfall, neighbors were calling one by one, quietly, cautiously. At first, it was just to ask what was going on, but then the stories started flowing. But a woman on Pine Hill Drive said her husband was threatened with foreclosure if he didn't pay a late fee that never existed. A man on Aspen Ridge admitted he'd been fined for not planting HOA-approved shrubs. Shrubs that conveniently cost $900 from a company owned by one of the board members. Another neighbor whispered that a family had vanished overnight 2 months ago. Moved out, they said, but no one saw a moving truck. Evan listened. He took notes. He connected dots. And slowly, a picture formed ugly and sharp. The HOA wasn't a homeowners association, it was a front, a racket. A network of shadow enforcement wrapped in neighborhood charm. Evan had spent his whole life working with systems, code structure, logic. Now he was facing one designed to make people disappear. And somewhere deep inside the garage, Rosie watched him work, eyes wide, face unreadable. She hadn't spoken all day, but when he sat down beside her that night, she finally whispered, "Why do they want it so bad?" Evan didn't answer right away because he didn't want to lie, because the truth was worse. "They want what it stands for," he said softly, "because it reminds them they're not in control." She nodded once. Quiet understanding. Evan reached over, handed her a granola bar. "We'll fight them." She looked down at it, then back at him. "Are we going to win?" He met her eyes. "I don't know," he said honestly, then added, "But I'm not moving." And in that moment, the war became real. Not about permits, not about violations, but about who got to decide what justice looked like in a neighborhood that had forgotten what community meant. The storm hit just before dawn. It wasn't thunder or rain, but something quieter, more insidious, the kind of storm that crept in through silence, that hummed behind closed doors and buzzed through unseen phone calls. Evan woke to headlights flashing through his bedroom window, 4 SUVs, unmarked engine, still running. He was downstairs in seconds, adrenaline spiking, baseball bat in hand. They didn't knock. They didn't have to. Outside, Troy stood at the edge of the property, flanked by 2 strangers in dark suits, and a third man holding what looked like a thick packet of documents. The one in front was clean-cut, calm and surgical in his confidence. "Mr. Cole," he called, voice polite but hollow. "We have a warrant." Evan stepped out, jaw tight. "What kind of warrant?" "Emergency, municipal, override," the man replied, citing imminent structural risk and unlawful occupancy. "The garage is to be cleared and condemned within the hour." Evan's pulse pounded. "That garage is federally protected." "Not according to this," the man said, lifting a document thick with legal jargon and city department stamps. "We received an anonymous tip alleging criminal use of the property, human trafficking." Evan blinked. "What?" It triggered. "An expedited override," the man said flatly. "We're required to investigate immediately." Evan stepped closer. "You think I'm running a trafficking ring?" The man didn't answer. Troy smirked behind him, and that's when Evan understood. They weren't trying to expose him. They were trying to bury him. The oldest trick in the book: weaponize the system, feed it lies. Let it eat the truth alive. Inside, Rachel heard the commotion. She rushed outside, eyes wide, pulling her jacket around herself. The other women were behind her, one of them carrying a child, barely 2 years old. One of the men in black raised his phone, already filming. Rachel froze. "Get inside," Evan said, stepping in front of her. "Now." But the damage was done. The camera had caught what it needed: a shaky image of distressed women, children, shadows in the background. The lie had teeth now. The lead agent turned back to Evan. "If you refuse entry, we escalate to state-level enforcement, police, child services, potentially federal agencies." "Are you sure you want that?" Evan's fists clenched at his sides. He was cornered. Until the sirens came. Again. Only this time, there were more of them. 3 police cruisers, 1 state marshal vehicle, and behind them, a black sedan that Evan instantly recognized: Marshal Jackson. He stepped out of his car like a man who hadn't slept in 2 days, coat billowing, folder in hand, and rage simmering just beneath his composed surface. The lead man from the HOA froze. "Federal jurisdiction," Jackson said coldly. "Step back." The man's confidence cracked. "You don't have." Jackson snapped open the folder, revealing a court-sealed document with a bold red stamp. "Here's your override," Jackson said, signed by a federal judge. "This garage remains protected. Any attempt to enter it without explicit permission will result in charges of obstruction and unlawful surveillance." The silence was sharp enough to draw blood. Troy looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. The men in suits exchanged glances. Then wordlessly, they turned back to their SUVs and drove away. No apology, no justification, just dust. Evan watched them go, chest heaving. Jackson stepped forward. "You all right?" he asked. "Define all right," Evan muttered. Jackson gave him a grim smile. "Thought so." Behind them, Rachel approached slowly, her expression pale, but steady. She looked to Jackson. "Why are they doing this?" she asked. "Why do they care so much about a garage?" Jackson's jaw flexed. "Because it's not just a garage," he said. "It's leverage control. You can't run a fear-based empire when people start building sanctuaries." He turned back to Evan. "And you, my friend, just painted a target on something bigger than you realize." Evan didn't flinch. "Then, let them aim." Jackson smiled faintly. "I thought you might say that." He reached into his coat and handed Evan a small hard drive. "What's this?" Evan asked. "Proof," Jackson replied. "Everything we've got on the HOA board. Every bribe, every threat, every forced foreclosure and property, flip testimonies, financials, video names." "Why me?" "Because you stood your ground when no one else would," Jackson said. "And because the people inside that garage trust you." Evan looked at the drive in his hand. "This could burn the whole thing down," he said quietly. Jackson's eyes gleamed. "Exactly.